Shalom, ladies, and welcome to Coffee and Connection Week 56. Purim Katan Sameach to all of you. I'm unclear as to whether Baruch Hashem being here in Jerusalem, yes, and it is after dark, if we celebrate Purim Katan tonight or we wait till tomorrow night. I'm not sure because it's every time that happens, I'm like, wait, do we just do Purim Katan with everybody else? Do we have our own Purim Katan? I don't know, but hey, happy Purim. Let's get into the mood. I definitely have started my coffee a little early, even though it's decaf. I can tell you that starting to sip it woke me up and had me feeling really getting ready to connect with all of you. So I'm very happy to be talking to all of you today. Shira's got hers too. Yay! We're very happy to be talking to you today about this concept of joy. Always have so much to say about Purim. I think it's such a gift that we get to read the Megillah like twice every year, even though sometimes that second time feels like a little bit like, oh my gosh, we have to do this whole thing again. But there's so much wisdom, there's so much depth in it. And I always find so many little like tidbits of little like nuggets of wisdom that I always want to share with all of you. And I'm thinking that really I'm going to do that before Purim so we can talk about some of it before. Last year, I know we did, I think, 2 sessions on the Megillah, and I'd love to do more of it with you this year just because there's so much depth. Actually, we just had at our house this Shabbos a guy who just like 6 months ago made Aliyah from Iran. And we were like, oh my, I asked, that was one of the questions. We asked him a million questions. But one of the things I asked him is, can you like share with us some insights into the Megillah that you, having grown up in the same place where it happened, that you understand in a way that we don't understand, right? Like something that we're missing. And he started trying to explain to me, he's like, I don't think I can do this really in English. So I was like, please write it up, put it in Google Translate and send it to me because I love this stuff. So I'm really excited to just like dive into this deeply. But let's just talk about joy for a moment. Let's talk about happiness. Let's talk about how this concept of joy, and we even see like in Purim, come on, there is like an aspect of like joy being correlated with like having a good time. Like, come on, Purim is just, there's this thing of like having fun. Now I know a lot of women say, a lot of women complain that they don't get to have fun on Purim. A lot of women hate Purim because they say it's not fun for them. It's fun for the kids. It's fun for the men getting all drunk, and we don't get to have fun. So I hear that. I get it. And I definitely am happy to speak to that if that's something that people are interested in and looking to like see like can we look in this a little bit in a different way. But I'm never one to negate people's feelings. So like I get it. I get that it's not always so fun for us. What I will say though is that we definitely see an aspect of like the joy of Purim being linked to the idea of having a good time, right? We are meant to have a mishta, we're meant to have fun. You know, the dressing up and the yes, the drinking, whether you're drinking or you're watching other people drink, there's something light to it. There's something going on. There, the kids like they spend the whole month or 2 months just having fun in school and doing all these extra things. There's something there. There's some message that I'm sure we're meant to get about part of what joy is. So I want to speak to that because we often hear, a little bit of conflicting messages on that. Like on the one hand, we talk about joy and what joy really is, right? And we talk about how, well, let's take a minute to define joy, right? Joy is not pleasure, right? Joy is not necessarily pleasure, right? We know that we can have a lot of pleasure and it doesn't necessarily bring us joy, right? You can like be like, I'm gonna eat like as much cake as I want, or cookies or chocolate, or I could drink a million cups of coffee and bring myself so much pleasure. That's not going to bring me joy when I'm like over caffeinated and my brain is firing and I'm having my crazy anxiety and like I feel like, oh my gosh, we're all gonna die. Like that's what happens to me if I drink too many cups of coffee. Okay. So like I know. Or I'm lying in bed and I can't fall asleep at night because I had coffee too late at night. So that like, yeah, we can have pleasure, but pleasure isn't necessarily joy, right? And we can have often we can have sometimes, I don't say often, but there is sometimes that joy of, I just want to write something down so I don't forget to share it. There is sometimes the joy of not having the pleasure, right? Like when we say to ourselves, you know what, I really don't need to eat this, you know, like 3 pieces of pizza, and we feel better about how we feel. Our body feels better. We feel healthier. We feel more sustained because we ate something that was going to fill us up, and we feel good like the next day when like we don't feel all bloated and disgusting. Or we say, you know, I could really like, uh, I could have the joy of like making like 10, extra dishes for Shabbos, and that joy of like, look at all the food that I made, but then, we're feeling exhausted and we didn't like can't even enjoy Shabbos. Versus sometimes we say like, I'm going to sacrifice a sense of my pleasure so that I can have joy, right? Because joy is really much more than that sense of happiness, of that sense of pleasure. What's interesting here is how this ties into our self-care, because we do talk about like take care of yourself, have pleasure, have your coffee. And yes, and this is a really important concept. Maybe we'll do a coffee and connection on this on its own at some point, because it's a huge topic that can be easily misunderstood, where people start to think of self-care as the goal, right? Where like their life becomes about the self-care, or their life becomes about, you know, finding those, figuring out how to get in all the self-care, as opposed to recognizing that the self-care is a means. It's a means to an end. It's a means, it's something that yeah, it feels good and we use that to pursue other aspects of our life, right? And when we find ourselves getting stuck in our self-care, and there's different ways that a woman can we don't, it's not like a woman wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to spend my whole day just like indulging 24/7. That's it. That's all I'm up to. That's all I care about. But there are certain signs that we may be taking our self-care from a means to an ends, right? When it starts to take over, when it becomes something that kind of, it's a whole topic on its own. We're gonna leave it for now, but I just wanted to share like, yes, there is, of course, self-care is important. Pleasure is important. Pleasure gives us strength. Pleasure gives us a lightness, right? Like, which is what we're looking for. We do want a sense of lightness in our life. If we're spending all of our time on like the focus of like what's real joy, and that what we're going to get to, there's going to be that extra heaviness. So we do want self-care. We do want to enjoy our life. We want pleasure. We want happiness. We want it as a means, right? It helps us. It makes us feel light so that then we can actually pursue what true joy is. So we're going to get to what true joy is. I just wanted to make that little, have that little caveat idea about how pleasure does fit in. Now, what else joy is not is positivity. Joy is not like, Baruch Hashem, everything's great, everything's always okay. I'm always happy. I'm never sad. I'm never angry. I'm never mad. Actually, by definition, it can't be, because happiness is an emotion. Joy is an emotion. It's a deep emotion, but it's an emotion just like anything else. And if we start to tell ourselves that we are always happy, that everything's always great, what are we doing? We're denying half of our, at least half of our emotional reality, right? Because we all feel happy sometimes, and sometimes we feel sad, and sometimes we feel angry, and sometimes we feel frustrated, and sometimes we feel lonely, and sometimes we feel tired, right? Like we feel a lot of things, right? We feel a lot of emotions. And the problem is, if we deny our negative feelings, we're also going to it's freezing. Is it freezing for everyone? No. Okay, so whoever said Royzy, it must be your computer, okay? But thank you for letting me know, because sometimes it really is for all of us. So I appreciate that. So where was I? Can you hear the music, by the way, Shira? No? Okay. Okay. So we can end up denying, we won't even be able to feel the good feelings. We won't feel the joy if we're denying the fact that we sometimes have other emotions. Joy is beyond the positivity. outlook approach to life. Okay, we can have, and I remember learning this very deeply at one point in my life when I was young. I was probably 21, 22 years. I think I was 22. And in one day, I had to go to a very, very difficult unveiling. And in the same day, within a bunch of hours, go to one of my best friend's weddings. And it was so interesting for me to like see that shift and how we were able to go from like this unveiling to the wedding. And I really got that feeling of like, this is what joy is. Joy is not about just everything's always happy and great. Joy is I'm what we're going to say, right? Joy is doing what I need to do, right? Joy is connecting connecting to myself in the right way at the right time. And there are times I'm going to feel sad, and that's okay to feel that sadness. You know, you see these things like spend all of Adar like not being sad, and like you'll have this big Yeshua. Does that like, or spend it all in joy and you'll have a big Yeshua? Does that mean that if something sad happens, you can't cry? No. If we don't cry about the sad things that happen, if we don't feel emotional, that how are we going to daven to Hashem to work to change it or to work through it? If we don't allow ourselves to feel angry or frustrated or resentful, how are we going to realize, oh, there's something here that I need to work on? If we don't allow ourselves to feel our emotions, it doesn't make them go away. So, joy is not about pretending we don't have negative emotions. Joy is about it's beyond those emotions because our emotions actually help guide us and help us move forward towards what real joy is, right? So, what is real joy? And this is something that I'm sure you've all heard. It's just sometimes we have to hear it again. I know I need to hear it again. I mean, we have Adar every year, so we need to hear it over and over again. True joy is about actualizing our true selves. True joy is about getting in touch with who am I and actually becoming that woman. And as I become her, as I take steps forward to become her, it feels amazing. That is joy. That is the happiness that I get from actualizing myself, from really connecting with Hashem the way that I want to connect with Him, from really being with my family the way I want to, being the woman I want to be. That's what's going to create joy. And it's interesting because when we look in the Megillah, you know, the Megillah is like a tragic book. It's really tragic if you think about it. It's really like incredibly sad because at the end of the Megillah, everyone's all happy and whatever, but like Esther's still in the palace. She lives in the palace for the rest of her life. And there's midrashim that want to like help us feel a little bit better about it. So they're like, "Don't worry, her son is Daryavesh, and he's going to build the base of Migdash." And it's trying to give us like a little bit of chizuk, right? Like she did good, she had children, she taught them Torah. Like, okay, and, like she never left. She never left the palace. She never had to. She never got to stop being the queen of Persia. She never stopped being married to King Ahasuerus. And that's tragic. That's a real tragedy. And yet we see Esther not as a tragic figure. We don't think of her as like, oh, poor Esther, right? She's not a victim. She's actually a very powerful woman. We see her as a Navi. We see her as a queen in this regal way. When we dress up as Esther, when we picture her, the fact that she's listed as one of the seven Neviot, we picture her in this very regal way, this very dignified, this very, you know, the opposite of victim picture, right? Why? Why is she not a victim? And I think we talked about this last year. I shared with all of you some ideas on Esther that Esther in that moment had to make a decision. She, before then, was a very passive woman. She did what Mordecai told her. She did what Hatach, right? What he told her to do. She did what Achashverosh made her do. She was very passive. She went with nothing except with what they told her to do, right? She always followed everyone else's words. And then Mordecai comes to her and says, Esther, maybe this is exactly why you're here. If you don't do it, someone else will do it. God has his ways. God is all powerful. He'll save the Jews if the Jews are meant to be saved. But what if this is the reason that you've been suffering all these years? Because it was a while already. And in that moment, Esther shifts into a woman who is no longer doing what everyone else tells her to do. She's telling everyone else what to do. She tells Mordecai what to do. She tells the Jewish people what to do. She tells Ahasuerus what to do, right? She is a powerful woman because in that moment when she could have been in a sense of yeush, of despair, of overwhelm, of sadness, she did two things, right? Actually, in the thing I said last year, she did like three things or whatever. But she turned to Hashem for guidance, right? That's Tehillim Kaf Betz. Kaylee Lamas of Tani, why have you left me? She knew where to get the guidance from, and then she literally took steps forward and she did what needed to get done to fulfill what she didn't even know for sure, but what seemed to be her purpose. She did it. She did what she needed to do. And at the end of that, she created joy. La Yehudim Haita Ora v'Simcha. There was joy. There was true joy for everyone. It includes her, right? She felt that joy. It wasn't fun for her. It wasn't something good that she wanted. It wasn't like it was something she wanted to do. It wasn't pleasure. It wasn't positivity. She didn't say, "No, don't worry, Mordecai. Let's just have a muna. Everything's going to be okay." She didn't do that either. She said, "What needs to be done?" Mordecai said, maybe this is your mission in life. Okay, this is what we're doing. And she took a step forward. And it's a very powerful message for us. I really see Esther as this really powerful woman that we can really learn so much from because she really stepped into that power, whereas she could have taken a step back. She could have said, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm just this little, like, frummy girl stuck in the palace. What am I supposed to do? No, she said, okay, I have a mission. There's something that I need to do. I'm going to take the steps that I need to take to do that. So there's something very important that we learn from this as to what it is to have true joy. It's not just about recognizing, like, okay, this may is my potential, or this is what connects me. It's saying, what step can I take today to make that happen? That creates true joy, right? And the second like question that I brought to our coffee and connection today is like, well, it doesn't that get very heavy, like if we're constantly thinking about, like, what do I need to be and who do I need to be and how can I work on myself and did I say the right thing and what am I thinking right now and what am I feeling? And you know yes, it can feel, like we're constantly um, thinking about things and analyzing. And it is important to give ourselves permission to, like, be, right? Not just to always, like, our mind always to be working and always to be analyzing. But what's very interesting is that when you think about it, what actually allows us to step back and have a good time? If you ever think of, like, when have you had a good time, right? When do you enjoy yourself? When are you having fun? When are you laughing and able to just, like, be with someone and enjoy yourself with them, right? There's usually two things that are necessary to be able to do that, right? If you think about whether it's going on a date with your husband that is a fun experience, if you think about hanging out with your best friend, and doing whatever, depending on where you are, what you're going to do, how you're going to hang out, if it's, sitting around with your kids and just laughing together and playing games and enjoying your time with them, in order to really have a good time, to have that fun, pleasurable, and yes, joyful experience in life, I think there's two things that we have to be able to do. One is that we have to be able to let go of the fears and anxieties that often cloud our minds, right? We have to be able to let go of the stories and all the stuff that can get in the way of being able to have a good time. If the whole time that, I'm hanging out with my friend, I'm thinking, what does she think about me? And do I look okay? And like, I can't believe she just said that to me, even though it's obvious that she loves me very much. I can't believe she said that. Doesn't she know that that would trigger me? And oh, is it okay? Like, I wonder what something that happened a week, like if we're constantly in our heads and thinking about all of our fears and anxieties and stories and limiting beliefs, if we're telling ourselves I can't have fun, I'm not allowed to have a good time, this makes me a bad mother or a bad wife, that I'm enjoying myself, or maybe I need to be more serious with my kids, or why is my husband why did he say this and why didn't he say that? If we're all up in those stories, we ain't having a good time, right? Like, we can't sit back and enjoy ourselves if we're all in that stuff. So, how do we get out of that stuff is by doing this work, right? When we know how to work through our stories, we know how to separate between our feeling, between what happened and what I'm making it mean. When we're able to recognize our fears and our limiting beliefs, that's so much a part of how we're able to have a good time. And the second part that really goes along with that first is that in order to have a good time, we have to feel safe. We have to feel safe and be able to, and for other people to feel safe with us, right? And that's where that love, respect, and empathy comes in as well, right? Creating that safety, that connection that allows me to just be myself, right? That allows me to enjoy you and you being yourself. That allows me to just have that fun, right? So, yes, it may seem sometimes like all of this work that we do can be in our minds and make it hard for us to relax. Well, that's where the self care comes in. And that's why it's important to have time set aside where I'm working on these things so it doesn't have to take over all the time, whether it's the time that I'm speaking to my coach, or the time that I'm journaling, or the time that I go into my group coaching WhatsApp, or it's the time that I'm on coffee and connection, or it's before I go to sleep but I'm doing cheshbon and nefesh. I have that time. And yeah, it fires in my brain throughout the day, but I'm not like it's not taking over. But by doing that work, that's how when an opportunity comes up for me to have a good time, I can let go of my fears, I can let go of my anxieties and my stories and enjoy myself. I can go on a date with my husband and have a good time because I'm not all up in why did he say this and what. I can just let go and trust and enjoy and be myself, be who I am, not all worried about, oh, what's he going to think if I say this? And is he going to get upset at me? And why did he say that? Right? Because it's through the work that I'm able to let go. Does that make sense? Like, we think that the work is going to overwhelm us and not allow us to have fun, but it's actually through doing the work that we're able to have fun, that we're able to enjoy ourselves, that often in ways that we never could before. Like, I like, I don't know if anyone can relate to this. Share, maybe you can tell me if you can relate to this. Like, our dates didn't used to be so fun. It was like we almost never went out because it felt like we would fight or we'd end up not having a good time or whatever. And now, like, thank God, we love going out together and we can enjoy our time together. And it's such a bracha. I don't forget that for a second. It's such a bracha and it's such a testament to all the effort that we've put into ourselves and into our relationship, that we can have fun, right? We want to just be able, like, shouldn't we just be able to have fun? Like, no, the fun comes from the fact that we have that safety and we have that connection, and we can work through this stuff that even if something comes up, we could get through it really quickly and go back to having a good time, right? So those are my thoughts today that I was thinking about in terms of joy and happiness and being able to really enjoy ourselves, not in spite of the work, but with the work, through the work, through working on ourselves. And, as we really step into. I mean, some of you, you're gearing up for it, but as we're stepping into not just Purim Katan, but now we're actually a month before Purim, so we get the energy already. We were in Adar, now we're a month before Purim. Like we're really, there's less stages here. I invite you all to think about what really brings you joy in your heart of hearts, in your soul, in your, all parts, your emotional and physical and spiritual joy. What really brings you that joy? And what steps can you take to create that joy, to live that joy, to ignite it, right? Because that's really what we get to do. That's what we get to do when we work on ourselves and we know that we are being the women that we want to be. We know that we're being in integrity and allowing ourselves to work through the stuff that gets in the way of being the women we want to be. That's how we can truly experience true joy. So let me know if you have any questions on that, any thoughts. You're always welcome to email me your takeaways. It's great to see all of you. Wow, Baruch Hashem, there's so many of you on here live. Great to see you. Great to have you. And of course, you're always welcome. If you're listening to the recording, you also get a shout out. Kol hakavod for taking that time. And until next week, may we all be blessed to live, love, and be loved with all our hearts. Purim Katan Sameach. Mwah.